This is the lead-based paint disclosure. So we upload this to the listing documents because we want any potential buyer to have it available to review and to sign, to include as part of their contract. And we want to make sure that you have completed your section first so that they can then respond to it. So that then, kind of tidies up the offer process. What it is saying is that properties built prior to 1978, that there is a potential that lead-based paint could be in the property. So obviously we won't see one of these disclosures for a property built after 1978. And there is a pamphlet that all buyers receive that lets them know what some of the dangers of lead-based paint are. If this particular property has a lease agreement, like an early occupancy lease agreement, then this little piece here would apply, but it's not typically the case. And then cancellation rights. So if a buyer did not receive a copy of this disclosure, then once they go under contract and they do receive this disclosure, they would have 3 days during which time they could cancel their contract because of any information disclosed here. Typically, most sellers don't have any knowledge of the presence of lead-based paint and also do not have any records or reports of lead-based paint. So the most common answers here would be seller has no knowledge, and then seller has no reports or records. So you would check those boxes unless you do happen to have knowledge of lead-based paint to the property and or have any records or reports of lead-based paint in the property. So you will check the appropriate boxes here. And then when the buyer is completing their offer documents, they'll indicate whether they have waived the opportunity to conduct a risk assessment or accepted an opportunity. Now, if they accept an opportunity to conduct a risk assessment, typically they would be doing that during their home inspection period. So the amount of time that they have within which to do that is the same default of 10 days, just like the home inspection default is 10 days. If they discover that there is lead-based paint that needs to be abated, they can give notice that such a condition exists, and as the seller, if you choose not to correct it, then the deal could terminate and the buyer gets their earnest money deposit back. So the buyer would have to give notice, and then you as the seller can elect to correct the issues. If you choose not to correct the issues, again, the deal could terminate. And in the event that an agreement cannot be reached, the buyer can give notice to terminate the agreement. If the buyer does not give that notice to terminate the agreement, though, it's assumed that they are okay with you not correcting the issues, and the deal continues on forward. So I know that's a little bit confusing. The important thing to keep in mind is that often there really isn't, flaking paint for them to take a sample of, to have tested, to then draw up some sort of request for abatement. But important information to know nonetheless, that this could potentially, come about, since any property that's built prior to 1978 potentially could have lead-based paint in it that might come to light during the home inspection. So this part gets filled out by the buyer when they're completing their documents, and then they will sign and initial their piece of this. The other reason that we're providing it to them in the very beginning is, back up here, the only reason that they get to have the 3 days to terminate their agreement, rescind their agreement in the beginning, is if they hadn't been provided the disclosure up front. And so we want to provide the disclosure up front because then upon entering into the agreement, they've already received the disclosure, so they no longer have that 3-day period to cancel.